kind of operations are expected to continue as people head back to work. On the N12.
The Dean of Mill Park Business School says South Africa needs to take advantage of the current solidarity among citizens to build a better future. Kobus Oosthuizen recently wrote that the COVID-19 pandemic threatens to sideline the Sustainable Development Goals set out by the United Nations. He joins us now via Skype to get into this conversation. And of course, these goals include the elimination of hunger, poverty, as well as inequality. Kobus, thanks a lot for joining us this evening. You make an observation that the pandemic provides us not only the opportunity to save ourselves from the disease, but also to achieve lasting social as well as environmental change. How so?
Good evening, Faith, and good evening, viewers. Yes, whilst one is reflecting on the current situation, and with all the social challenges and the economic challenges that's front and center of our thinking every day, and also very cognizant, especially in my area where I operate, of the Sustainable Development Goals and the decade of action that we've been called to, with the objective of 2030, achieving these goals. And of course, our own National Development Plan is also very much aligned to that. Now, the COVID pandemic has, in a sense, arrested our attention, and good for that, because we need to find short-term solutions to this problem. But in the same sense, now there are other important matters that's moved on to the peripheral, so to speak. However, another thing that has become very clear is that what we've noticed now is many of the cracks, so to speak, the gaps of our achievement of these objectives are becoming much more prominent. With the threats of people losing jobs and the increase potentially of people going hungry, and so in a way then we are now very much shaken up. It's actually we've been woken up to these things of being part of our lives, and I'm talking now about our fight against hunger and poverty, etc., the environmental issues and so forth. But they've kind of been, we go about our daily chores and tasks and everything else, and it's a by 10 years, we will get there. But now it's now in a sense illuminating many of these social and economic problems, and again reminding us, and therefore I make the argument that now is also the time, with the solidarity that now have been created from our nation, to really work towards in the same breath of fighting the COVID-19 virus, but also in the objective of achieving those Sustainable Development Goals.
And one would say that, Kobus, when in order for us to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, for example, the eradication of extreme poverty by 2030, for example, it would need countries to become more outward facing as opposed to inward facing, and take on a more global approach as a more nationalistic agenda to the detriment of the global cause. But right now, people are literally battling with the pandemic, and many countries are forced to be more inward-facing and really strike self-preservation as top of the agenda. So then where does one draw that difference between achieving these UN Sustainable Goals, which we must absolutely achieve, but also the right to preserve the citizens of an individual country?
Absolutely. Now, it is. I would suggest that it's not either or. It's more of this wake-up call that we have now all had, and that when we now draw the Sustainable Development Goals into our, let's call it the executive part of our thinking, we're in the same instance addressing these matters, these very, very serious matters that has now been caused by the pandemic, that has now been illuminated by this. So the collective action and the greater awareness now of these social ills that has been around, and that many people probably haven't been all that aware about. But now it's very pertinent. It's in our face. So my argument would rather than be it's not the one or the other, but in addressing the problems and the challenges of the pandemic in the same breath, we would also potentially then move closer to achieving the goals of these sustainable development goals, yeah.
But it certainly makes the agenda of achieving these sustainable development goals that much more difficult, especially when it comes to, the fact that eradicating extreme poverty by 2030 literally may become something that may not be achievable simply because the pandemic brings along with it unemployment. Unemployment brings along with it further exacerbated poverty, right? Already with the country that a significant portion is living below the poverty line. One can imagine what happens post-COVID-19, not only in the South African context, not only in the continent, but looking at the global agenda as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely, Faith. You're so right. Now, 10 years go so quickly. If we just think back 2010 and now 2020, what have we achieved? What has happened in one's own personal life and so forth? It goes very quickly. So when the question then comes, do I think it's achieved? The goals are then still achievable, specifically now considering what's going on in the global context. One might be tempted to say, it appears that we might not be able to achieve them. But in the same breath, I would also suggest that it would be irresponsible to throw in the towel now and say, let's just let it be and we will get to it and so forth. We, on the different strata of global society, each one of us as an individual and collective can do our part. There's a lot of knowledge about this out there, or information. But, someone made the observation once that the longest distance in the universe is the distance between the head and the heart. So now that we've kind of been quickened, is the time to also now bring our hearts to our minds, and then to really apply the knowledge and the information that we've had, that we have. So at the global level, there is the United Nations, who's the custodian of the Sustainable Development Goals, but we are also a member state, so together with 170 other countries. Now, therefore, our activities, or then on the national level, rather, the policies and so forth that addresses and talks to these things, and then at the meso level, the organizational, whether private, public, and so forth. Because even companies now are being made more aware of these things, because it's not only touching the bottom line, but their people, and it influences their people. So from a management practice perspective and a leadership perspective, this is also becoming very pertinent. And now if you draw it right through to let's call it the nano level, the individual level, myself, what is it that I can do? How can I involve now my heart in what is currently happening in across the world and in our country on our doorsteps? And while I am now pouring my being into these problems, or contributing rather to it, then I will also be contributing towards these sustainable development goals.
Kobus says, and we're going to leave it there, the Dean of Mill Park Business School, giving us, just really the realities in terms of how is it that